portfolio kind of review. How do you spot undervalued stocks as a whole? What's your strategy when looking for investments?
We look for innovative ideas
Mm.
that fit into our view of the world and where things are going. For example, AI revolution is a real revolution. The value proposition is exponential across industries. We have different companies that we are exposed to it that are tackling problems and solutions using AI. You know what? There's a plethora, but you got to be very careful about what you pick because, there's a lot of components to it that could be a problem down the road. So we look for big growth markets because we want to see things that we can make a 50 and 100x on our money.
Yeah, and then that makes up for any that maybe flat line, don't do anything, or have longer time frames than the others as well. In your opinion, how would you say, the last year's been? What's met expectations? What have been some surprises? And then maybe things that have exceeded your expectations as well?
The problem with this business is timelines are great to think about, but very hard to predict. Execution of real business is tough and uncertain in the sense that, you have to complete your design and development cycles, and then you have to introduce and market, and they're each very challenging. So certainly with 3D, I would say that things that we thought were going to happen, say last spring to summer, ultimately have been delayed for almost a year. But, we're now believing that the second half of this year is a time when a number of our projects are going to basically get market penetration and begin their growth cycles. And we think they could be, quite prolific, but you got to get out of the gate. Overall, I'm happy with the development. I'm unhappy with the timing.
Yeah.
There's been delays, but it's not like things have gotten worse. They've just taken longer.
Yeah, and I think people appreciate the honesty. I mean, there's some really good stuff there. There's some frustration, but then there've been some things, I guess, that have exceeded expectations as well, even with the likes of QIMC and things like that. I mean, adding to just the sort of picture of things at the moment, what's your view on the macro side of things? Maybe, with the markets being in turmoil as of recently, things have settled down a bit. Small caps have been relatively unaffected, and I think that's, shown in the portfolio as well.
Investors don't like uncertainty. There's some uncertainty on the macro side. But when it comes to the organic ideas that we get behind, we think they're somewhat independent because they're going after new and developing markets that there's always a thirst and an appetite for when it comes to consuming those products. And so I am not that concerned other than psychology, which, affects things in the short run. I don't think the world's coming to an end. I think that, the key things that we look at around healthcare, technology, and so forth are fundamentally sound and in place. I just think it's all about execution in the various companies. That's to me what more I focus on.
And then drilling down a little bit deeper, what would you say are some of the hottest right now with everything that's going on? I know you just come out of a very interesting and impressive meeting for one of your companies, but perhaps touch on AIML, Avacana.
Yeah. So, I'm very excited about Avacana. Sales growth, turning profitable, product development and so forth, and partnership with Philip Morris. AIML completed a financing, which I think they needed the capital to implement their business plan. They are in a very exciting company in the area of medical heart diagnostics. And I think it's a company to watch for sure. One of our companies, Q, is launching at the Cannes Film Festival, and basically a fintech company used, for micropayments. First big application is going to be in movie streaming, content streaming. And I think it's a real hand in glove fit. So we're very excited about that. We've been involved with that for about 7 years. And now to see them getting traction is really good.
And you don't comment obviously much on price, but I mean, if people do their DD, they can see that some of these companies are companies that you've been adding, and 3D have been adding quite aggressively as of lately, which is obviously extremely encouraging for people looking at things now. I mean, perhaps with obviously with Todak and the micropayments, perhaps expand more on the blockchain side of the portfolio and the crypto side. Any updates there? Maybe Hypercycle and Dynex as well.
Yeah, so Hypercycle is also getting very close to its commercial launch, and it's basically its engine is the Internet of AI, allowing all AIs to speak to each other, agent to agent, which we believe in the future 99.9% of transactions are going to be AI to AI. And this enables that on a decentralized basis. So delayed a bit, but it's happening, as we speak. Dynex, quantum computing using software. They continue to add strategic partners. So it's very novel idea. They're working on a chip as well. One of our companies that we invested in a number of years ago, centralized crypto exchange that is going to be an offshoot off of a major centralized foreign currency exchange called Multibank. It's going to start trading in May, so we're really happy about that. So we feel that we have good exposure on the crypto and blockchain side. Again, it's all going to come to fruition in Q3 and Q4.
Yeah, yeah. Discount to asset value, I think it's the highest it's ever been. I mean, it's 80% at the moment. I mean, maybe even ignoring that, what would you say are what's the growth story or the milestones that we could anticipate that might propel 3D as a whole and its portfolio forward, and like you say, the second half of this year into next?
Yeah, I think that once we can start to embark on a quarter-on-quarter NAV growth, and we'll have a multiple that will be more in line with a company like ours. Right now, it's almost distressed value.
Yeah.
And I think that has been a result of sort of the market and the lack of milestones that we thought were going to occur in 2024 and the delay of them. And when people are disappointed, selling begets selling. But currently at this discount, there's a disconnect.
Yeah, it's kind of gets a little bit laughable. Would you say you're in a phase of managing what you already have because everything's commercializing? Would you just say you're primarily managing what you have, or are you still looking for new opportunities as well, or would these opportunities have to be just unbelievable for you to have to pursue?
Yeah, we've got a lot on our plate that we're managing that are growing. And so we want to be value added to our existing projects, but we're always looking for new projects. But I want to see some growth in what we have before we start committing new capital.
Yeah, yeah. And then any comments on successful exits or trims in the last year? Things that have been even better than expected as well. Is there anything there you'd like to comment on?
No, I mean it's all in the financials. We're basically investing deeper into the companies that we have the most conviction on.
You touched on it briefly towards the beginning of the interview with AIML, and they just completed financing because of all these very, very high level people coming onto the board of the company, and then that's sort of a foundation going forward. That's the purpose of the placing for AIML. I mean, perhaps touch on also 3D's placing and maybe Premium Resources, the reason for those placings and what the funds are going to be used for.
Yeah, I mean, basically they have a world-class project in Botswana. It needs a lot of capital. Very, very world-class team has just come in, both on the management and on the board side and on the investor side. I think that could really develop nicely.
Saw that the sort of new graphics and new video drone footage of some of the sites for Premium Resources. So that's interesting. You have an issue at Buyback where the company basically buys its own stock, but then also retires those shares. And I don't think people put an emphasis on the retiring of those shares. What are your plans going forward on this, and explain how that enhances shareholder value to sort of a novice?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously capital required. So as some of our projects really advance and we have excess capital, one of the best places to use it is to restart our share buyback and cancel those shares and reduce the number of shares outstanding in the company. That's one of my priorities. But First, we want to focus on supporting the investments we already have on our books.
What would you say, doing the sort of year review, what would you say the percentage of stock that was maybe bought back in the last year, and do you forecast that being similar, the same, more or less in the year to come?
It's hard to predict that right now.
Yeah. And obviously a big question that goes round is why is 3D so undervalued, or what's your sort of USP that you bring ahead of other companies? Why people should choose 3D over other public companies?
Well, I mean, you got to deal with apples and apples, not apples and oranges. We're a holding company, so we're distinct from most other companies. The average investor who wants to invest in early stage companies that are actively managed, that are unique, that they may not get exposure to, is the reason why you want to own 3D. And now you get to buy it on sale.
Yeah.
So for those investors that are interested in high growth rate, moonshot potential, it's there, but there's always a risk reward, in the sense that this is a very difficult business. It's rocket science. You have to take something that was nothing and make it into something that's very valuable. And, the probabilities of that are quite low. But we've survived this long. We've done this before. And what happens is, as soon as something really starts to happen and mature, there's a huge amount of interest that I think is going to come into the company. So you want to buy a company like ours when it's quiet, not when it's making new highs.
Exactly.
And so it's a bit of, reverse psychology, if you will. And so, we're not for everybody, but for people that really want to be part of something that could be a rocket ship, and invest in it at a discount, I think that, those criteria, if they're met, it's a good fit for those people that are interested in that type of investment.
And I really agree on the strategy of when people should be investing. And sadly, people don't do that. People should really look for companies, trading sideways or trading slightly up and on a slow rate, and then, have the opportunity to really explode, rather than capture them when they've already started to move. In our sort of recent trailer, which I think was done quite well, investors basically had this idea of becoming a first mover through 3D and with 3D alongside it. You're an investor, but also you're a visionary as well, because you were there near the beginning. If you're an investor looking at 3D, would that be the appeal to you as well?
I think so.
Yeah. And then how would you compare what you had with Pinetree before the 150x run up that it had and traded multiples its NAV? How would you compare to what you had now to what you had then? Because it can obviously give some signs as to what might happen next.
Yeah, I think Pinetree was much more resource driven. We're invested in resources and we're going to invest more, but the mix in the portfolio is a bit different.
Yeah, more tech and AI and things that we didn't have back then as well.
Right.
Yeah. And then this is a sort of slightly amusing question, but I think it links to maybe the share buybacks, for example. It's kind of like a secret weapon or strategy that you have up your sleeve. Is there anything from those days that you're sort of waiting in the wings to utilize, maybe when the company's trading a few times its NAV and there's more shares traded, things like that? Or is there any strategies that you'd be thinking about using in the future?
We're always working on those.
Yeah. Is there anything you can say on that? Is there any ideas or strategies you look at? And
you know what? There's many tools in the toolbox, but there's no point predicting things that just aren't there today yet.
Yes, yeah. Keep them as secret weapons, basically, and don't reveal them to.
Well, we've got to wait for the sun, the stars, and the moon to align.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And then where do you see 3D in 6 to 12 months from now?
Much higher.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, I wouldn't, obviously you can't comment on the stock, but I definitely think that we've had the low, in my opinion, everyone should have on their watch list. And then, lastly, if you're an investor and viewer watching this video, what would you do next? Would it be watch the YouTube videos, have a starter position? Yeah, what would be the action points here?
Yeah, I think that the more investors can educate themselves on all the various components in 3D, the more comfortable they'll feel. So the YouTube videos are a great educational tool.
Mhm.
And yeah, just buy a nominal amount of shares and watch us.
Lovely. Yeah. Good advice. Thank you very much, Sheldon, and I'm sure you'll be on very soon, especially in this next month. I think it's a whole host of things happening this in May. So yeah,
Okay.
looking forward to it.
Thank you.